Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going over the scope that you see in my hands right now. This is the Primary Arms Platinum 1:8 with the Raptor M2 Reticle. So there's a lot going on there, and I'll break it down for you. So they're Platinum series from Primary Arms. They're made in Japan, so they're not made in China, which I know a lot of folks do care about. And these ones here are made at a very high quality factory over in Japan. A lot of you guys probably know what it is, but it has HD glass, and HD glass is high density glass. It has a lot of really high end premium coatings to give you really good light transmission as well as color correctness as you're looking through it. So while Primary Arms kind of built their name around affordable budget optics, this one's not really a budget optic per se, but I think for what you get, it's pretty affordable in that regard. Now I apologize, moving forward I do have a little bit of a cold, so if my voice sounds even funnier than normal, that would be why. But what we're going to do here is let the dogs take a look at it, then get into the details of the scope, get into the reticle, and then what I think of it overall. Now that it's been inspected by the dogs, we'll get into the details of the actual scope itself. Here we do have our fast focus eye-ring piece here at the rear. It has a ton of adjustability to it. It's not so loose that it's going to easily move on you. In fact, I don't think it will move at all under any conditions, but it's not overly difficult to move either. What you want to do though, when you first get this in, take a look at the manual. I like to look at the sky. Some people say objects far away, whatever the case may be, and take a look there at the reticle. Play around with the eyepiece until the reticle is as clear as it can possibly be to your eye. So I recommend closing your eyes, moving it, opening them, and then taking a look at the reticle and just move throughout the distance that it has in terms of adjustability, and wherever it's the clearest for your eye, stick with that, and then you should never have to adjust it again. Continuing on forward, we do have our magnification adjustment ring here. As you guys can see, it's not overly difficult to move there with one hand. That's our 1x setting, and then rotate it all the way back over, and that is your 8x setting. It's pretty smooth all the way across. I recently did the Vortex Razor Gen 2 HD scope, Gen 2E rather, and that was one of my big complaints, was the magnification ring on that was just, it's very difficult to move, much more so than it needs to be. This one here is kind of a happy medium there. It's got some resistance to it, however, it's not difficult at all. It's definitely much easier than like the Vortex Razor HD, but it's also very smooth, so that way it's not going to like just be bumped off center or anything like that. It takes a concerted effort to move it, should you want to do so. And then of course this little piece right here is going to give you an indicator roughly at what your magnification range is, simply because if you're looking at it from behind, of course, in the shooting position, you'll note that over there on your left, it's basically, from the shooter's perspective anyway, at your 9 o'clock position, and when you rotate it all the way over to the 8, it's just a touch past the 3 o'clock position, so you can get a pretty good idea there where you're at without having to pop your head up and actually look at the magnification setting. On the left side of the optic, we do have our illumination settings. It's also where you're going to put your battery in there. It takes a CR2032 battery, pretty common stuff these days, and it does have 2 night vision settings. And if you want to run it with nods, feel free to do so. It is set up for that capability. And then it has settings 1 through 9, so for a total of 11 settings. One thing I really like about it is that the settings have an in-between slot. So if you know you're going to use this in low light or whatever the case may be, and you want that maximum brightness, I rather should say in daylight conditions rather, where you want that maximum brightness, you can set it right between 8 and 9, and then just click it to 9 whenever you need it without having to run through the entire list of settings like some scopes have. So that is nice. It's just a little bit quicker and convenient for the shooter. Both the windage and the elevation turrets are 1/10 mil adjustable, so every click is going to give you roughly 1/10 of a mil of movement. Mil, for those that don't know, is roughly 3.6, 3.7 inches at 100 yards, so you guys can kind of do the math from there. But what you want to do if you want to adjust it is take it from the down position, which is what we have it in here, pull it out, and then at this point you can actually adjust it however you see fit. Again, it has good tactile and audible feedback there. You definitely feel each click, and it kind of locks into place. There's probably more crisp turrets out there, but there's definitely a ton of worse ones, so it definitely gives you good feedback. I'll move it near my microphone so you guys can hear it. So again, the feedback is there, and of course if you want to set your 0, you just take this little screw here, pop these caps off, and then bring it right back to 0, and you would be set and good to go. Time for the part I think most of you guys were waiting for. We're going to get into the M2 Raptor reticle itself. Before I actually do that, rather, I want to discuss first focal plane versus second focal plane for low power variable optic scopes. So I'm on the record, I suppose you could say, as saying that for high magnification scopes, I generally speaking prefer a first focal plane, and for low power variable scopes like this, or variable optics like this one, I generally prefer second focal plane. So the reason for that is, again, speaking in generalities, first focal plane scopes will give you increased weight. You're going to have a limited eye box compared to their second focal plane counterparts, and also limits the field of view, which I guess goes right in line there with the eye box. So those are sort of downsides to it. This scope here does mitigate some of that, and I should also point out that the 1 to 8 on that 8 setting, I think we're kind of getting into borderline long range scopes type stuff, so it's kind of splitting hairs with what I talked about earlier in terms of a higher magnification scope versus a lower magnification scope. So the first focal plane reticle, for those that don't know, is going to be able to be used with ranging, whether it's from at the 1 setting or at the 8 setting. So no matter where you're at in terms of magnification, you can use the holdovers, the BDC, the ranging capabilities, all that stuff that I'm going to get into here in just a second. The downside of it is that the first focal plane reticle is going to look small and thin, or just small and not detailed to most folks at the lower power setting. And as you increase the power, the thickness of the reticle also increases versus what you're actually looking at on the background, or rather not what you're looking at on the background, but how it appears to your eye. So some folks think that it's a little bit harder to see at the low settings, and then again, there's a cover up of your actual target and what you're looking at on the higher settings. So those are downsides of it. That said, again, this scope here mitigates a lot of that with 2 things. So it does it with a 34mm tube versus the 1 to 6 scopes out there. Most of those are going to have 30mm tubes. It also does it with having the HD glass, which is really good. It's high density glass. That just helps in a lot of different ways and mitigate those factors I talked about. And the reticle here is designed to work well with the first focal plane type of scope. So that reticle itself, again, is what you guys see here on your screen. That chevron tip is going to be illuminated when the illumination is on, as is the ring on the outside there that you guys can see. It's designed primarily as a 5.56 optic. However, 308 works just fine. For 5.56, you're going to want to zero it at 100 yards outside of the really heavy stuff. If you're using like 77 grain ammo and stuff like that, the 50 grain, or rather the 50 yard zero that I'm about to talk about here in a second, might make a little bit more sense. So if you have 308s, particularly using like M80 ball or something like that, they recommend that you zero it at the tip of that chevron there at 50 yards. You're going to be a little bit high, like, inch or two at 100, and you're going to be back on right at 300 and 400 yards in terms of using that BDC. So that's why they recommend that you zero it at 50. With the slower moving stuff, it just kind of catches back up with it as the BDC goes along. To begin, we'll focus on the centerpiece there of the reticle. So we do have auto ranging capabilities as well as wind holds that you guys can see there in the center. So again, you're going to want to zero on that chevron tip, and then out at 300 yards away, the average width of a military age male, according to the military, is 18 to 19 inches. Now the ACSS system is set up for 18 inches. So you can see there at 300 yards, the guy here would be 300 yards away, and you know where to hold. Because of that, there on your chevron, you're going to hold basically right on that little tip of the post, the black post there, and you're going to be able to get those hits consistently at 300 yards. Continuing to move down, we do have the 400 yard tick mark, 500, it's not marked, and then of course 6, again 7 not marked, and then 8. So that's your distance in terms of yards. And again, you can see there as you move down the reticle what it's going to look like as your range estimating the target. Also here we do have the wind holds. So the first wind holds in terms of being close to the center stadium line is going to be a 5-mile-an-hour wind hold. That's for a consistent full value wind. So full value, for those who don't know, means blowing directly left to right at a 90-degree angle. It's going to be 5 and then out on the outside is going to be the 10-mile-an-hour wind hold. Again, that's for either 556 or 308, presuming that you actually zero it correctly. So out there on the outside of the reticle, we do have more ranging features. So you guys can see here how the auto ranging feature works for somebody if you can only see, like, for example, their torso. So you can see you set the bottom line there where their waist would be, and then where their head is, that's roughly their distance away. Just like I talked about earlier with the 18 inches, this system in terms of height is set up for an average person being 5'10" tall. So that's going to get you pretty close in a lot of situations. I've used this scope over the years a ton with this ACSS system, and it really works pretty darn well. On the inside, those two black dots that you see there, those are holdovers for a moving target. So again, according to the military, somebody who is carrying a rifle is going to be able to move at 8.6 miles per hour. That's where you're going to want to hold if you're engaging moving targets, and it will get you on point, again, assuming somebody is moving at that speed. Hopefully that reticle explanation made sense to some of you guys out there. It's kind of complex for somebody who's new, but once you get behind it and start using it, you'll realize that it really is very simple, and that kind of is the beauty of it. Now, the original 1:8 Platinum primary arm scope, if you guys watched that video a couple years ago that I did, one thing you'll see is that I said I wish they had a chevron tip instead of the dot in the middle. It just, for me anyway, makes it a little bit easier to zero a little bit more precisely, because I'm kind of neurotic in that way. And this one, of course, they did that, so that's definitely an improvement, at least as far as I see it. The wind holds are great, the auto ranging is great. I've shot this scope basically anywhere from 75 yards out to 700 yards on multiple occasions. And speaking of that, I've actually had this one in here for well over a year. This is the second one that ever came into the country, and I was waiting for them to release this model. I've shot it at least 20 times in terms of different days on the range. I have hours of shooting footage. I only took shooting footage from like 2 days, I think, or 3 days to make this video, simply because there's no point in having you guys watch me shoot this scope for hours. But trust me, I have a ton of rounds behind it. I've zeroed it on multiple different rifles. I've never had a single issue with it. When using 308, which is what I predominantly shot this with, I was using M80 ball and zeroed it exactly how they said, and the holdovers were spot on, again, out to 700 yards out there on my range. So you can't really ask for a lot more than that. It's very simple. It's very fast, transitioning on different distances as well, which is nice. Again, that's kind of one of the properties of the BDC. You don't have to run mill data in your head when moving from like a 600-yard target down to a 300-yard target. It's already done for you and built into the reticle. So that's good. Cost is going to be one thing that's going to be a little bit prohibitive for some folks. These ones here are right at $1,299. Again, like I said in the intro, Primary Arms made their name with budget optics. This isn't budget, but I think, again, if you look at other things out there on the market that are going to perform similarly and have similar features to it, it's not overpriced, again, compared to market competition. I also think the Raptor M2 probably I don't want to say this, probably my favorite low power variable optic reticle that I've tried to date. I would say, not probably, it definitely is. I really like it a lot. It's very easy, like I said, to use, and when you're on the range, easy is a good thing. It's not the lightest weight scope, and again, that has to do with the 34mm tube that it has on there. This one here weighs in, I think, right at 26 ounces on my scale. We'll roll a photo in so you guys can see that. So again, not super lightweight, but the first focal plane, like we said, tends to have some downsides to it, and that weight with 34mm tube and the really good glass tends to mitigate a lot of those. So in that regards, the weight kind of is your friend, helping you out with some of those potential downsides that low power variable optics can have in first focal plane. Again, is this low power variable? When you crank it up to 8, it's kind of on the borderline there. It kind of becomes a DMR type of optic that you can also use for CQB. So I think that alone is something that a lot of people are going to be attracted to. And I think we covered pretty much everything here. I didn't mention that if you guys actually post, or rather purchase this with the link that will be down in the video description, you can get a free mount as well. That deal is back on with Primary Arms for my channel's viewers, so that is a good thing. I appreciate Primary Arms doing that. If you guys are watching here on YouTube and you can't, or rather I can't post a link down there, you guys can check the video out over at my Facebook page or at my full 30 video on this scope. I will have the links there that you guys can use to get yourself a free mount. As always, guys, you can just message me over on Facebook as well if you want to get that link. I will whip one up for you and let you guys get that mount. So that's pretty much it. If you guys aren't following me over on Facebook, I definitely recommend you do. You can also sign up for my email list and get weekly deal updates and stuff like that, that I think a lot of folks do like and do enjoy. But that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for subscribing, and I hope to see all of you in the next video.